Hi, everyone. We're Sam and Cindy Sanford, and we've been married for 31 years. In March, it'll be 32 years.
That's right.
That's a long time.
That's a long time. And we met when we were in college back in the 70s. And that was a long time ago, but we did. We met in photography class, actually,
I had
in college.
a nice fro going.
He had a nice fro going there. Yeah, he did. He did. Yeah. He sat across the table from me, and I was just there because I needed an elective. He was there because he was serious about photography. So I was goofing off and he was serious. So he was one of those studious students.
Yeah, I used to ask Fazio. I would tell her, "Oh, hey, by the way, I don't have two wives. Fazio is her maiden name, and I call her Fazio. Some people get a little confused about that, but anyway, I've called her Fazio from day one since we met, and her whole family, everybody understands it. Nobody's confused when I say Fazio, even when I'm with the Fazio family. They all know I'm talking to Cindy. Yeah, I was we were in photography class, and like she said, I was the type of person that was I was very studious. I didn't wait till the last minute, and Fazio, I would go up to Fazio, and she would be cramming for her final thesis.
Right. And I would be like, "Can you help me?"
And
Can you help me? I'm
I would
last
push my
minute.
glasses up and I'd say, "Well, now Cindy, now Fazio, you can't wait till the last minute. You ought to be more studious and do this in a timely manner." And she used to say I was a loser, but no, that's when we met in college years ago,
From then on.
and we dated. Now here's a factoid. We seriously dated for like 10 years before we got married.
That's true.
We went from
Almost.
about 10 years, and our relatives, when you're first in a relationship and people are asking you about your relationship, they'll say, "Well, don't rush, take your time," and so people were telling us that, but it took us so long. We went from take your time to you're taking too much time.
You better hurry up.
You better hurry up.
Family.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Anyway.
So as far as being married to Fazio, and it's been a tremendous blessing for a whole lot of reasons. One of the things that when I think about Fazio is she does a wonderful job of grounding me. When it comes to, we have two children, Jacob and Gabby, and she is very good with helping me to keep my patience. Fazio is the real reason, as a matter of fact, that I'm in church today. When I had I'd strayed from the Lord years ago, and once I met Fazio and we got married and we moved to this area, Fazio started attending church, and she was dedicated to it. And I would literally, I never will forget, I would lay in bed in the morning on a Sunday morning, and she says, "Hey, I'm going to church. You want to go to church with me, Sam?" And sweetheart, and I go, "No." I got to the point, there were no more excuses, not that there ever were, but whatever I could think of didn't work anymore. And quite frankly, I'll just be frank, I just didn't want to go. And so Fazio, in her godly wisdom, she also got some of her godly women involved, and then the husbands of those women. And so I would get people peppering me with, "When are you going to come to church? We'd love to see you at church." And I was very convicted. I mean, the Holy Spirit convicted me, and finally, I, of course, ended up getting back into church. And so I tell you, Fazio has been a tremendous blessing to me when it comes to child rearing, when it comes to finances. She's a financial wizard in our house. And no, yes, you are. You're a financial wizard. And we have, put two children through college thanks to her financial wizardry and doing things the right way. What?
Debt free.
Debt free, yes, debt
debt.
free. Debt free, no debt.
No debt for college.
Really been a blessing. I could not have done that. I don't think I would have the wherewithal to do that. Sure, I know about finances, but in terms of being dedicated to it, every dollar has a name,
That's right.
And so,
my logo.
so she's a tremendous blessing to me for a whole lot of reasons, but those are just some of the few.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, sweetheart.
And you're a blessing to me. I was able to stay home with 2 kids for the first 18 years of their life because you went out and, as Gabby would say, made the bacon so that we could, all be home together. And that was really a blessing, especially in this area when it's really hard. And that's why financially you might think I'm a guru, but I'm not. I'm just really,
You are to me.
I just want to be able to, we wanted to be able to achieve a family life. And so we did without a lot of things so that we could, so I could stay at home. And Sam worked really hard at his job. 34 years with the government. He's retiring this month. And but it was the catalyst that obviously got us to this point today. So we're ready to look at retirement. But with that said, his dedication and then, him becoming involved in the church and being a man of God that God called him to be an elder and to do some things here in the church. And those are the type of things that I admire about him as he leads our family spiritually.
Thank you, sweetie.
You're welcome. I guess going back to what you said about not being in church and me being in church and having to go through that period of time when we didn't see eye to eye on things, that was difficult because we had 2 little babies, and I became that woman, that wife that I didn't want to be, that bugged you all the time about going to church or going to a social event, because all my friends, that was kind of an interesting story. We moved here from Ohio, several years without children. Then when we started having children, we moved here to Woodbridge, and I went to the Chin Center to exercise when Jacob was like 6 months old, and I met my dear friend Karen and her kids, and she's the one who invited me to church. And so from there, we started a relationship with them and all of those people from church, and they ended up being a church families here at First Baptist. Most of them are not here anymore because they've gone to other places, but they were my immediate church family. And so the hard part was when I'd say it's time to go to a social event or even play date, and Sam would be resistant to go because he knew that he might be asked to come to church or might be asked to go to Bible study or something like that. So that really became a difficult time in our life because we didn't see eye to eye on things. But, and I felt like I badgered, I cajoled, I threatened, all those things that as a Christian woman, you're really not supposed to do to your husband to get him to go to church. So it got to the point where I just had to trust God to say, you know what, I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm just going to let the Holy Spirit convict him and let other people speak into his life instead of me trying to be the catalyst for that, because all I was getting was resistance. And it wasn't for me to do that. It was for God to really change your heart about going to church or becoming involved or even hanging out with the friends that we had. So that was a really hard time. I had to really trust God that he would provide that and provide that way for your heart to change.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to my mind, and this is probably totally different out of left field perhaps, but Fazio and I, as we matured in our relationship, there were challenges that was because we were in a mixed marriage, and we really, when you have those kind of challenges, not only do you have to be submissive to each other, clearly you have to be submissive to the Lord in terms of situations that might bother you, in terms of things that you might think that you have a right to say or that you feel entitled to. And so I think that being in a marriage is one thing, and I think of Ephesians 5, and how we're a husband and wife are to be submissive to each other, of course, naturally. There's I think it adds a little different flavor, a little different twist when you are in a mixed marriage culturally or ethnically. And so there were some things that Fazio and I had to endure that quite frankly, only by the grace of God, that we were able to look at them rather lightly. Not that we made light of the situation, but what we endured, we didn't really think a whole lot of it. But it could have become something that was insurmountable in our marriage. But so I've learned a lot. I hope, not that I have achieved any of it in terms of being submissive the way I should be, but I will tell you, I've been a bonehead in our marriage about a lot of things. And one thing over the years that I've learned by this wonderful lady that I'm sitting next to here, one thing that I've learned is really is to ask for forgiveness and to also kill pride. I would tell you, in any marriage, in any difference, whatever it is, I can pretty much guarantee you, if you peel that onion back, at the base of that is going to be pride. It's going to be pride. And Scripture teaches us about pride. So that's one of the things that's been an invaluable experience to me as I've matured in our relationship and our marriage. It's all really little stuff. When we first got married and started seeing each other, we would even have little arguments over things that really don't even matter. And you get to a point, and we've gotten to a point, arguments, they're really hardly don't even exist anymore, because you realize it's just not worth it. It's a big waste of time. It robs your joy. And so, anyway.
Yeah. I would say the piece of advice I would give to an early married couple, when they start to have children, is to make time for each other, have a date night, have time to do things together, because you can get so wrapped up in taking care of kids that you forget each other. And being a stay-at-home mom, it was great. Like I said before, it was wonderful that I was able to do that, but everything was wrapped up in kids. And so at the end of the day, when Sam would walk in the door, I was done. I was just done with everybody, everything. And he would walk in and want some attention from the kids and from me, and everybody was just like crazy because it was the end of the day. And so that became really an obstacle. I think that becomes a huge obstacle in a marriage when you have little children. So I would say take the time, spend the money, get a babysitter, go out, do that type of thing. And now, as we're older and we don't have kids, it becomes a challenge as well, because it's like I have certain TV shows I like to watch, and he has certain TV shows he likes to watch. So we're in different rooms watching TV or Netflix or whatever it is. And so to take the time to spend together, even at this stage in our life. And so usually on the days that we're off, whether it be Saturday morning, Sunday morning, sometimes Friday if he's off, we'll take that time. We have a little front room in our house, and we'll have our coffee time.
Coffee time.
That's our coffee time.
Yeah.
Sam doesn't drink coffee, but he'll have a Coke. But it's called our coffee time.
Cold coffee.
Cold coffee. It's our coffee time. And we have that coffee time, so we catch up with what's going on in our day. What are you doing today? What's our week look like? Typically it's things like that, that kind of keep us connected before the day starts. And so that's been something that we've just kind of started doing in the last couple of years to kind of reconnect us.
It's been quite a while.
Well, okay, well maybe it has, but anyway, to reconnect us a couple times a week, because again, we both work still, and at the end of the day, conversation sometimes can be, you just want to go like just veg. And so we make that special time in the morning to do that before our date gets started.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. So I would suggest for all married couples, depending on how that works for you and depending on where you are, just make time for each other, because that's the most important thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would, I echo that. One of the things that my dad told me when I was growing up, he told me he always had these great words of wisdom, really, that he would pass on to me and that I live with today. One, he would tell me, he says, look, man, here's the way he called me. He says, look, man, he says, I want to tell you this. He would say, I know you're not going to understand this right now, but one day you will. And he would say things to me like, he says, I don't care if you are the president of the United States or if you're out on a nuclear sub. He would say, you spend time, you find a way to spend time with your family. So that said, it's important for couples, even if they have a slew of children, to find time for themselves. My dad used to also tell me, he says, look, I don't care if you and your wife have to get in the car and drive down the street and just sit for 5 minutes. Do that. I don't care if you don't have enough
get a
money.
babysitter.
Yeah, you get a babysitter. Yeah, take care of the kids, right? But
Don't leave the kids in the house by themselves.
Yeah, his
No, we
point.
don't want Child Protective Services coming.
Yeah,
No.
his point was that even if you only had money to buy an ice cream cone, you go do that with each other. And another wise thing that he taught me, and I will say specifically for men, can work both ways, but I will say this to the men. He said, whatever you start doing with your wife, like if it's a date night every Friday night, he said, don't start doing it and thinking one day you're going to walk in the house and stop doing it. So whatever you start, whatever tradition you start, men, you better keep it up. It keeps peace in the house.
Yeah, it's important. Well, and it's funny because on the same thing, my mom and dad were married really young, had me when they were really young. And I remember I'd either go, my siblings and I would either go to my grandparents or they'd get a babysitter. But literally every Saturday night they went out, and they would tell me that. They'd say, that's very important in your marriage. And they would get in the car, and like Sam said, they'd drive down the street, have an ice cream cone, spend some time together, come back. But they always made it important to be with each other because, like I said, they were very young too. And that was important to them to have some alone time, just the two of them. And so I think that would probably be the most important thing. You get so wrapped up in the day-to-day activity and whether you're working or whether you're raising kids, that the other person's going to feel left out.
Right.
And when that happens, that causes division because that other person goes looking for someone that's going to pay attention to them.
Right.
And so that becomes a real challenge in marriages. So I would say pay attention to the spouse, die to self, see what their needs are, and go from there, because that's how your marriage is going to survive.
Absolutely.
And put God first in your relationship this way, and then your spouse next. And once you do that, you're always going to be okay.
Yeah. Man, don't be married to everything else except your wife. Don't do that. It's just not a job, whatever. It's just not worth it.
It's not God honoring.
No, it's not God honoring at all.